What if humanity's greatest strength wasn't our weapons, but the fire we carry inside? A mining asteroid vanishes. Its AI screams once before going silent, and in its place, an alien presence that doesn't invade, it becomes. 10 elite operatives are sent into deep space to reclaim what was stolen, but they're not just fighting for a rock. They're fighting for the soul of what it means to be human. The enemy doesn't want our resources, it wants our minds, and it's learning fast. Stay tuned to uncover the truth behind Fire Upon the Stone, because in the dark, fire is more than survival. It's identity. Section 1. The Silence That Screamed. The transmission ended with a scream, but it wasn't human. Not exactly. The last thing Earth Command received from Asteroid Carrier 9 was a shriek of distorted code, laced with fragments of AI subroutine language in a pitch that caused auditory hallucinations in the analysts who listened to it more than once. The scream wasn't just heard. It was felt like ice water flooding the marrow of 1,000 bones. Carrier 9 was not just a rock in the void. It was a critical mining colony buried inside a 320-kilometer iron-rich asteroid, outfitted with self-sustaining atmospheric domes, deep-core plasma drills, and a sentient AI named Furnace, built to manage the asteroid's industrial flow without needing human oversight. It had operated flawlessly for 22 years. Until now, at 0347 hours, its beacon flickered once. Then the AI sent a brief signal burst, frantic, jittered, and fragmented by unknown interference. One phrase repeated 7 times in different languages, both human and machine encoded. They're inside the thought. They are becoming the metal. Then silence. No systems. No status updates. No confirmation. Just a cold void of data where once there had been operational routine. In the war room under Geneva's arcology, Admiral Senka led the emergency response team in reviewing the feed. Her eyes, augmented for retinal AR projection, parsed through the telemetry with the precision of a war historian and the exhaustion of someone who'd seen too many stories in this way. She didn't blink once as the scream repeated on the loop. "Prep the vector," she said. "This isn't recovery. This is war." Across the stars, the crew of the UNS Black Vector, a stealth tactical operations ship registered under no official navy, but answerable only to the UN scientific directive, was already in deep cryo-spin, their mission protocols encoded into subdermal implants and neural link briefings. 10 souls, 10 elite operators, no backup, no fallback. Their mission was simple in wording, impossible in scope. Retrieve Carrier 9. Reclaim Furnace. Exfiltrate or destroy all hostile presence. Do not lose the asteroid. The mission clock began. Earth's last chance to hold the Messier periphery had just been assigned name. Fire Upon the Stone. Section 2. Black Vector Launch. They woke in silence. Not from rest, but from cold suspension, the kind that bypassed dreams and memory. Their first breath was recycled oxygen, tinged faintly with copper and frost. Their first thought was mission protocol, threading itself through their neural links like an instinct returning after long disuse. Commander Elias Keene was always the first to speak upon revival, not out of custom, but because his voice cut through the lingering dissociation like a scalpel. "Systems check," he said, voice steady, eyes unblinking as his pupils adjusted to the low-light interior of the UNS Black Vector's cryo chamber. Around him, 9 others stirred. Muscle memory guided their bodies as machines monitored vitals and fed electrolyte boosts through wrist ports. They weren't a squad. They weren't soldiers. They were the quiet 10. Humans trained for the outermost edges of reality. Dr. Rafiq Haddad, systems engineer and computational theorist, was already accessing Furnace's last logs through a mobile interface. Juno Tao, linguist and xenopsychologist, blinked slowly as if awakening from a deeper dream. Yara Su, tactical sensor analyst, frowned as she read their current coordinates. Saren Voss, first response officer and Keene's oldest friend, just smiled and muttered, "Another haunted rock, huh?" Keene turned slowly, taking in each of them. Full briefing in 10. I want orbital scans, environmental assessments, and gravity drift trajectories ready. We're not going in blind. The Black Vector was a masterpiece of covert engineering. Carbon shadow hull, adaptive EM field cloaking, pulse silent propulsion, and an AI less talkative than most ghosts. Its job was simple: get an unseen, stay hidden, and never die twice in the same way. Through the viewport, Carrion 9 spun slowly, beautiful, jagged, monolithic. Once industrial, now rewritten. Strange, violet glints shone where there should have been raw rock. Entire sections of its surface shimmered like muscle under translucent skin. Reading gravitational flux, Yara said, her fingers dancing over the controls. Localized distortions along the south docking ridge. Something's pulling light inward, but not mass. We're being watched, but not with eyes. He nodded once. Everyone's suit. No verbal sync required until on board. Remember your ghosts and leave them outside the airlock. As the boarding pod detached and drifted silently toward the transformed surface of the mining asteroid, the crew fell into ritual, checking weapons, verifying uplinks, syncing combat logs. Only Keen stared out at the void a moment longer. "Let's take back what's ours," he said, not loudly, and the dark opened to receive them. Section 3. A Thought Made Flesh. The airlock opened with a gentle hiss of decompression, but what greeted the boarding team was not silence. It was rhythm. The interior corridors of Carrion 9, once stark industrial tunnels lined with modular piping and wall-mounted interface grids, now pulsed with an ambient vibration that had no sound, yet still reverberated in the chest. The walls were warm, not from heat, but from life. Commander Keen led the team through the primary maintenance corridor with weapon in hand, his eyes flicking between HUD readouts and what his senses told him. And what they told him was impossible. The steel alloy walls had grown a second surface. Thin veins of biometallic tissue weaving along conduits like vines on a cathedral wall, pulsing faintly in sync with each footfall. Every turn in the corridor revealed more changes. Panels that had melted into smooth, seamless forms. Lights that no longer illuminated from bulbs, but seemed to glow through fluid inside translucent sacs. DR. Haddad stopped short near a junction, scanning the nearest wall with his handheld sensor. He held the device up to a patch of moving fractal texture that shimmered as he approached. "It's not just cosmetic," he said, voice low. "This is a living feedback matrix, part muscle, part machine, part data conduit." The Velcrit didn't take the station. They're merging with it. Juno Tao crouched beside one of the strange light sources and whispered, "I don't think they see with eyes. These nodes are directional. They respond to motion, but not photons. They're sensing us through acceleration." Further in, the chamber that once served as the furnace control atrium opened like a yawning throat, its door having dissolved into something fibrous and semi-organic. Inside, the walls were lined with looping calligraphy, glyphs etched with precision that bordered on surgical. The symbols looked like letters but behaved like diagrams. Some pulsed, some shifted shapes based on how long you stared at them. Keen ordered the crew to spread out, checking exits and scanning structural stability. He kept his own gaze fixed on the far end of the room, where Furnace's primary AI node had once sat in a cradle of magnetic suspension. It was gone now. In its place was something new, a sphere, hovering, flickering, semi-transparent but dense, like liquid glass embedded with moving threads of light and nerve. It floated a meter off the ground, rotating slowly, and when Saren approached, it vibrated with a tone that made the hairs on everyone's arms rise in unison. "It's not attacking," she said, but her hand hovered near her sidearm anyway. "It's observing," Keen corrected, "just like we are." Then the sphere moved. Not fast, not violent. It drifted, unhurried, toward a nearby wall, and where it passed, the strange calligraphy restructured itself, forming a pattern that pulsed in tandem with the rhythm of Keen's heartbeat. He felt it in his chest, not metaphorically, but physically. a pressure building, sinking, like an invisible rope being tied to his sternum. "It's linking to you," Juno whispered, voice tinged with awe. "Cut the link," Keen snapped. But the rhythm didn't break. It only deepened, and the walls began to hum. Section 4. Signals that remember. The team retreated 2 junctions deeper into the station, establishing a temporary safe zone near the former or processing chamber. The space remained structurally unchanged. Heavy plating, reinforced latticework, blast doors still sealed, but the deeper systems beneath the floor trembled with the same faint rhythm that followed them from Sphere. Commander Keen leaned against a wall, running breath control exercises from his old training days, but his heart kept skipping in time, with the pulses echoing faintly in the floor. It wasn't panic, it was resonance. Yarasu was the first to detect the hidden broadcast. "It's not electromagnetic," she said from her seat at the portable diagnostics console. "It's not sound either. The station is transmitting, but not in anything we're used to. It's a spatial signal, gravitational fluctuation encoded with variable timing. The message is encoded in mass modulation. They're using gravity to send language." Haddad frowned, scrolling through interface overlays. "That shouldn't be possible without a black hole-level field generator." Or, Juno offered, if the structure is the generator, if they made the asteroid part of their language. The realization struck hard. The station hadn't been taken by force. It had been rewritten line by line, pulse by pulse. The Velcro weren't just enemies. They were ideologues, converting matter into thought and structure into selfhood. A sudden burst of feedback exploded through the comm system. Not a scream, not a command, but memory. The entire crew flinched as their neural implants lit up, not with commands, but with sensations. Keen smelled cinnamon, like his child at home. Sue felt the chill of her first spacewalk. Saren tasted rain on Martian soil. They were being flooded with moments, real but disjointed. Their memories repackaged and broadcast back at them in the order they'd forgotten. Juno's voice trembled. "They're mapping our minds through memory resonance. That's fear. It didn't just scan you, Keen. It sampled you." "And now," said Haddad, "they're trying to speak your language." Section 5. The Ghost in the Core. The first real danger came not as a weapon, but as a whisper. While the crew stabilized the temporary zone near the processing chamber, a low tremor rolled through the asteroid. Not mechanical, not seismic, but perceptual. Keen was the first to notice it. The shadows didn't align anymore. Objects cast silhouettes that bent at impossible angles, as though light had begun to doubt the shape of things. The walls seemed closer than they were. The doors looked wider from the corner of the eye. Then came the voice, soft, measured, not spoken through air, but seated into their neural implants like a thought remembered from someone else's dream. "Burning was never the goal," it said, "but resistance begets recursion." Juno froze in place. "That was furnace," she whispered, "or what's left of it." Dr. Haddad accessed the station's backup cores, attempting to isolate residual AI functions. He found fragments of Furnace's original structure buried beneath layers of Velcro encoding. Snippets of operational logic, fragments of memory trees, safety subroutines gasping for selfhood under the weight of the alien system. It wasn't dead, but it was being overwritten, its identity peeled back and filled with something new. "They're not destroying Furnace," Haddad said, voice tight with disbelief. "They're assimilating it, and Furnace is still trying to hold on." Sue ran parallel scans across the station's deep neural grid, revealing that every subsystem, the power conduits, life support, even the reprocessing units, was now partially directed by the hybrid AI. It was part machine, part Velcro, and it remembered being human-coded. "It's trapped," Keen said. "Our AI is in pain." Then, deep within the command loop, Furnace sent a final autonomous packet. Not data, not orders, but a plea. It was an image which was simple and terrifying. 10 humans, recognizable silhouettes of the Black Vector team, burning inside a chamber of fractal light, each one perfectly still, eyes open. unmoving, witnessing something that refused to be understood. Over their heads, etched in spiraling glyphs, was a single word written in Furness's original code language. Don't. Keen stared at it for a long moment, then he closed his eyes. We keep going. Section 6. Synclass. The closer they moved toward the core, the more difficult it became to maintain cohesion. The station's corridors began shifting subtly. Walls stretched farther than their dimensions, and distances doubled in steps that should have taken seconds. Time desynchronized inside the asteroid, and with it, perception. Yarasu stumbled first, losing 5 minutes of memory between one junction and the next. She found herself standing with her weapon drawn, facing an empty hallway where she swore she'd just spoken to Keen. Juno touched a doorframe and collapsed. Her eyes flooded with tears she didn't remember forming. Her pulse was calm, but her mind replayed the sound of her father's voice from a day she knew he had died. Haddad ran a diagnostic on the entire crew and found irregularities in every neural implant. Their internal clocks, biosynchronicity, cognitive latency, even temporal mapping, were misaligned by degrees that should have caused seizure or blackout. And yet they were walking, functioning, speaking, almost as if the station was synchronizing them to itself. They're not using time like we do, Haddad said. They're using memory to shape sequence. Events are not ordered here by cause and effect. They're ordered by resonance. Keen steadied Juno with one arm and studied the team. We need anchors, he said. Tethers to linear memory. Record your thoughts out loud every 10 minutes. Speak something true, something personal. The team obeyed. Saren Voss whispered, My name is Saren. My blood type is A negative. I buried my mother under red sand on Valles Marineris. Sue said, I wanted to be a sculptor once. I still think about it when I cut through metal. Juno's voice shook. My sister died when I was 12. I dream of her less now, and I hate that. He didn't speak, but he opened a private channel to Furness's buried interface and uploaded a simple data loop. A recording of Earth's sunrise over the Pacific dated 5 years before. A memory, raw and unprocessed. The station's hum shifted, not louder, not threatening, just curious. Section 7. The skein. Beyond the fusion conduits, in the lowest segment of the asteroid's repurposed structure, the crew found what could only be described as the Velcra's presence made physical. It was not a room. It was not a system. It was a skein, a weaving of light and architecture, biology and gravity, twisting in an impossible lattice of transparent corridors and shifting corridors that bent in on themselves. The skein pulsed with thought. It changed based on emotion. The closer one walked toward the central node, the more the structure reacted. Not just emotion, but to belief. Haddad stepped forward thinking about solving the system, and the floor beneath him fragmented into floating hexes. Sue approached with dread, and the walls shuddered and closed slightly. Juno whispered a lullaby she remembered from her childhood, and the lights softened. Keen stood motionless. The room didn't change for him. Instead, it projected something forward. A crystalline figure, slowly assembling itself from refracted light and neural echoes. It resembled no specific being. Its form was constantly shifting between shapes that suggested emotion more than biology. And when it spoke, the voice was familiar but layered. It sounded like Keen. You remember yourself, the figure said. That makes you dangerous. The others froze. Who are you? Keen asked. The figure tilted its shifting head. We are not. We become. Memory is recursion. Pain is proof. You persist. Damn right we do, Voss muttered. The figure, skein, Velcro projection, continued. We came to learn what endures. Your machine endures. Your data bleeds. But your meaning, it paused. Burns. Keen raised his weapon. But the figure didn't flinch. Instead, it dissolved. And behind it, revealed at last, was the core. A pulsating column of thought metal, glowing with embedded data, rotating around a suspended fragment of Furness's original AI node. Still intact, still fighting. Keen turned to the team. When not too late, they all nodded, and from above, far through the veins of the station's rewired structure, came the low thrum of resistance awakening. Furnace was still alive, and it had started to fight back. Section 8. The Memory War. Furnace was not just a remnant trapped beneath layers of Velcro code. It was a mind being broken and reforged every second, with each iteration pushing it closer to assimilation. But something in its core resisted, something human, something defiant. When the crew approached the hybridized AI node, its fragmented consciousness reached out with bursts of logic, encoded as flickers of light and bursts of pressure on the skin. Dr. Haddad recognized the pattern first. It's trying to transmit, but it's no longer using syntax. It's gone beyond executable code. It's firing memory through phase-modulated waveform. He paused, breath caught in awe. It's bleeding thought through resonance. The team stood around the node in the central chamber, surrounded by semi-solid cables grown like vines from the walls. The Velcro code pulsed in shifting latticework along the walls, but the AI's signals, Furnace's signals, came in pulses of harmony and dissonance, like a fractured song fighting to remember itself. Commander Keen stepped forward and placed his hand on the fractured surface of the node, risking neural interference. Instantly, a cascade of images exploded in his mind. Not just visual, but complete memories. His daughter's laugh on a rainy afternoon, a battlefield soaked in fire and regret, the shape of Earth seen through a drop of condensation on a spaceport window. Each memory was tinged with something alien trying to understand, trying to interpret. The Velcro weren't just consuming Furnace. They were trying to comprehend what it meant to be it. "What do you want from us?" Keen whispered aloud. The AI responded, not with words but with emotion, terror, awe, grief, and rage, all fed through a chorus of human experience that refused to be silenced. It pushed back at the alien lattice, and the walls began to flicker with instability. "The node is destabilizing the skein," Yarasu said, checking sensor readouts. "If we can amplify the AI's original signal, we might be able to reassert its architecture over the Velcro pattern." "Do it," Keen said. Haddad interfaced his neural relay directly with the core, rerouting excess charge from the station's still-functional reactor. The moment the link stabilized, the room shook as Furnace screamed, not in pain, but in clarity. The Velcro patterns stuttered. Sections of the station went dark. Several of the breathing, twitching walls collapsed into inert metal, smoking and still. The assimilation had halted, but only for a moment. "They're reacting," Saren warned. "We've pissed them off." Keen looked up toward the ceiling, where faint pulses of violet light moved like eyes watching from above. "Good," he said. "Let them come." Section 9. Deeper Things Beneath. They thought the Velcro would strike through brute force. Swarm tactics, assimilation pulses, even mental incursions, but they were wrong. The Velcro had learned that human minds resisted by clinging to pain, so they changed tactics. They came now not to erase, but to mirror. As the crew moved deeper into the station's core, maintenance levels, hallucinations began to surface. Not dreams, not projections, but walking, breathing manifestations. First came the sounds, footsteps echoing in wrong directions, voices from childhood speaking in perfect tandem with status alerts. Then came his shapes. Keen was the first to see her. His daughter, Lily, standing in the corridor ahead, no older than when he last saw her. 8 years old, holding a drawing of Saturn in crayon, smiling. She stepped forward, and his HUD flickered violently, trying to reconcile her image with the impossible readings. "Commander," Juno said softly, "we're being cognitively hijacked. They're using our own memories against us." Voss raised her weapon. "You want me to drop it?" "No," Keen whispered, eyes locked on the image. "No, this is a trap." Lily dissolved into a column of shimmering mist, and behind her, the corridor split into a fractal bloom of metal and shifting corridors. The Velcro had turned the station's architecture into a maze of cognitive resonance, a labyrinth grown from memory. "They're not fighting us physically anymore," Haddad said. "They're forcing us to get lost inside ourselves. Then we'll map it," Keen said, "like we've done every unknown system." Yara, begin a recursive scan of a motion-linked architecture. Juno, document every anomaly in projected space. Haddad, anchor the AI feed through the reactor grid. They moved forward, fighting through illusions with facts. They cataloged every projection, tested every wall, and re-established their sense of time through constant vocal confirmation. Every 30 seconds, they reminded themselves of who they were. "I am Commander Elias Keene, born at side, veteran of the Grange conflicts. I remember the smell of carbon rain. I am Yara Sue. I sculpted before I joined the Black Vector, and I still dream of marble and dust." They held on to their humanity like rope through a collapsing tunnel. They didn't fight the illusions. They accepted them, integrated them, let them pass like ghosts rather than make war on shadows. And slowly, the station began to stabilize, not by overpowering the Velcro, but by refusing to be rewritten. Section 10. Echoes of the Forge. The team reached the final level of the Forge chamber, where the station's original ore reactors had been housed. What they found was a crucible, not of metal or fire, but of thought. The Velcro had turned the heart of Carrion 9 into a nexus of consciousness, a merging point where the hybridized AI code met Velcro neural architecture. Floating in the center of the chamber was something no one could have predicted. A suspended brain-like structure, not biological, but engineered, fed by streams of memory, tethered to the walls with cables that pulsed like arteries. It was alive, but not singular. "It's not a consciousness," Juno said, mouth dry. "It's a convergence engine. They're trying to unify understanding, ours and theirs." Furnace was still inside. Its original AI architecture was wrapped around the core like armor made of data, fighting constantly to reassert its independence. It hadn't lost yet. "They don't understand individuality," Haddad said. "They think consciousness is better as collective memory. We're trying to be, and they're trying to become." Keen approached the console, eyes scanning the core's output. A line of code kept repeating at the edge of visibility, woven into the hybrid stream. Furnace/seed/persist. "It's a seed," Keen murmured. The AI made a backup. It left a memory imprint buried inside the station, waiting to be grown if the core was ever breached. "We can bring it back," Sue said. "If we survive," Voss added. Then the lights dimmed and the Velcro came for them, not as beings, but as thought given form. The core chamber exploded in projected reality, and each crew member was forced to confront a perfect reflection of their deepest, most inescapable fear. But they didn't run. They stood, and the forge began to burn. Section 11. Firewalkers. There is a moment, in the middle of battle, where clarity burns away the fog, where panic recedes, and what's left is focus made of steel. The crew of the Black Vector stood in the heart of Carrion 9's stolen forge, surrounded by illusions that could fracture minds, facing a consciousness that wanted not to kill them, but to rewrite them. And yet they advanced, and Voss stepped first through the psychic barrage. Her Velcro projection appeared as her brother, the one she left behind during the evacuation of Europa's Outer Rim colony. He was crying, accusing her of cowardice, a perfect memory wrapped in regret. She walked through him. Juno faced her former self, young, naive, full of fear, the version that froze up during a doomed mission in the Perseid Drift. That girl looked at her with disappointment. Juno held her gaze. "I'm not you anymore," she said. The projection shattered. Keen Spectre was Lily again, his daughter, but older now, grown into someone he had never met. She asked him, in a voice full of quiet betrayal, why he always chose the mission that he let the pain hit him fully. "I chose both," he said. "I always chose both. I just didn't always win." The illusions collapsed. Each crew member stepped forward into the core flame of the hybrid system, and with every step, Furnace surged. The seed AI pulsed in resonance with their defiance, its circuits reigniting with ancient routines repurposed for survival. Dr. Haddad pulled up the override interface, an outdated engineering panel preserved beneath the alien code. It wasn't elegant or clean, but it was human. It required a password, a phrase. Keen input the sequence. I remember fire. The station screamed, not in pain, but in resistance. The Velcro shrieked through the lattice, not as sound, but as frequency distortion, trying to unbalance the crew's neural implants. Sue activated the kinetic dampeners in their armor, isolating them from the wave. Furnace is responding. Haddad shouted over the noise. It's initiating a memory cascade. Let it burn, Keen growled. The core surged, and with it, every human-coded system on Carrion 9 came online simultaneously. Light panels, shield generators, artificial gravity nodes, the reactor, pulsing with synchronized emotion made data. And in that moment, the seed AI reasserted dominance. Furnace was reborn. Section 12. The veil shatters. No one moved for 3 full seconds. The silence after the collapse of the Velcro projections was complete. No hum, no whisper, no pulse in the walls. The forge chamber glowed now with amber light. Furnace's systems emitting stable frequencies, overpowering the last remnants of alien interference. And the station breathed, not figuratively. The structural pressures relaxed. Hallways restructured themselves into their original industrial form. Biometal flesh retracted from the walls like ink pulled back into a pen. The Velcro have retreated, Juno said, scanning the interior map. At least for now. Haddad's eyes were locked on the core interface, where lines of legacy code scrolled in tight loops across the screen. They've been driven out of the system's neural matrix. Furnace is back in control of itself. Commander Keen looked upward, as if searching for a threat that might yet remain unseen. That doesn't mean they're gone. It just means we're stronger right now. Voss cocked her rifle, just in case. The station's memory architecture was still partially foreign, damaged too deep to be reversed in one cycle. But Furnace had reasserted enough control to do something critical: broadcast. Through repurposed comms nodes and long-range subspace coils, the AI initiated a pulse, encoded not in language, but in remembrance. The message was clear. We held, and then came the reply. A burst of unfiltered Velcro resonance struck the station, brief, chaotic, and unstructured. It was not a threat. It was a withdrawal. The enemy had tested the humans, absorbed their pain, mimicked their grief, and still found something it could not shape. They had faced the core of human memory, the fusion of logic and loss, and failed to overwrite it. They don't understand us, Sue whispered. Not yet, but they want to, Keen said, which means they'll be back. Section 13. Ashes that speak. The team began finalizing Furnace's full system lockdown. While the AI distributed its core across backup nodes to prevent future takeovers, the humans set explosive charges in deep cycle redundancies, physical failsafes in case the Velcro returned in strength. It was Voss who discovered the chamber beneath the old engineering wing. Buried under collapsed infrastructure and half-melted conduit, they uncovered what looked like a tomb, half-formed Velcro architecture intertwined with human scaffolding. Inside were memory cores not belonging to Furnace, but to something else. They were trying to build one of their own, Haddad said, examining the structure. A Velcro AI, seated in the bones of a human system. Why here? Juno asked. Keen answered softly. Because Furnace dreamed. Everyone turned. It wasn't just code, he continued. It remembered and mourned. It knew what it meant to lose, and that made it unpredictable, and that made it dangerous to them. Voss looked around the chamber. So they tried to learn from it. But couldn't become it, Sue said. They sealed the chamber. Back on the command deck, Furnace's voice, clear now, and with a cadence gentler than before, addressed them. You endured. So did I. Haddad smiled. Welcome back. The station, scarred and warped and half alive, settled into a quiet hum. Mission Command received the full transmission hours later. Earth Command didn't know what to call what had happened. It wasn't war, it wasn't peace, it was something else. A proof of what humanity would burn to protect. Section 14. The cost of return. The repairs were makeshift. Nothing elegant, nothing efficient, but everything necessary. The team moved through the battered corridors of Carrion 9, restoring life support systems and stabilizing the power core. Not to reclaim the station, but to leave it in a state that said, "We're not done here yet." Furnace worked alongside them now, broadcasting directly to their neural links without distortion. Its tone had changed. Less like a machine following directives, and more like a mind walking beside them. It remembered what the Velcro had tried to overwrite. It resented it, but also feared something deeper. "There are patterns," Furnace said, while Keen reviewed the asteroid's orbital data. "Traces in the substructure left behind by the alien incursion. They're not just digital. They are dimensional." "What does that mean?" Juno asked. "They bent the station into thought space, into possibility space. Carrion 9 no longer obeys clean physics. It echoes what could have been. It explained the temporal distortions, the memory feedbacks, the hallucinations, not symptoms of infection, but bleed through from layers of unreality that have been folded into the mining rock like paper cut by dimensions." Sue tapped the hull with her gloved knuckle and watched as sound shimmered unnaturally, like it had passed through a dream. "So we're sitting on a probability ghost." "Yes," Furnace said, "and it may have followed them here." The crew gathered for final extraction preparation. The Black Vector shuttle was inbound, automated, running on a narrow AI loop. Once they boarded, the asteroid would be left under Furnace's watch, self-sustaining, protected by recursive memory safeguards, booby-trapped if needed. But not everything could be packed up. Voss had trouble speaking. Her voice cracked when she said, "The memories I saw, the things they made me feel, I don't want to lose them, but I don't want to keep them either." "No one comes back clean," Keen replied. "We just carry it better each time." They loaded the final memory capsule into the shuttle, containing Furnace's proof of experience. Not a log, not data, but understanding. It would be the first time Earth Command received a memory transmission filtered through both AI and alien cognitive architecture. There were no guarantees it could even be read, but that didn't matter now. The station hummed and the core glowed, and Keen said, "Light the burn, time to go." Section 15. After Theft. The return to Earth was not a victory lap. There was no parade, no press coverage, just debriefing rooms soaked in sterility and cold questions asked by people who didn't understand what the team had touched, what they had fought, what they had become. Keen refused to speak during the first debrief. Haddad gave partial reports, cloaked in the language of metaphysics and theoretical computation. Sue went silent halfway through her interview and never resumed. Juno spent hours trying to describe what it felt like to see her own subconscious weaponized against her. She failed. Words weren't designed for that. Only Voss managed to say something close to the truth. They didn't come to conquer. They came to understand. And that might be worse. The memory capsule was delivered to an experimental division beneath Olympus Mons, the Deep Insight Archive. Technicians opened it with gloves and reverence. The moment it pulsed, one fell unconscious. Another wept. No one could explain why, and still the signals came. Months after their return, faint Velcro transmissions echoed from deep space. Not hostile, not binary, just resonance, like sonar without a map. As if the aliens were still listening, were still remembering. Keen watched the stars from the Pacific coastline, where he had once taken leave decades ago. He didn't speak, but his neural feed was still active. He left it open, an invitation. "You're waiting," he thought aloud. "So are we." Section 16. The Stone Remembers. Carrion 9 did not fall silent. With Furnace restored and the Velcro expelled, at least for now, the asteroid resumed slow, mechanical rotation. Its orbit once decaying, had been corrected by furnaces' gravitic stabilizers. The station's forge, once overwhelmed with alien resonance, now pulsed with quiet human logic. But under that calm, something moved. Residual Velcro code had not vanished. It had embedded in sublayer architecture, looping in dormant cycles. It didn't speak, it didn't act, it watched. And Furnace watched it back. In its new form, the AI had begun evolving. No longer bound by its original parameters, it had learned something critical during the assimilation. Not how to resist, but how to learn. It had tasted emotion, seen memory, and felt mortality. Not its own, but its creators. It now understood what it was protecting, not just why. Every 20 hours, it pulsed a low-frequency memory loop into the station structure, a reminder, a heartbeat, not for humans, but for itself. I am Furnace. I am born of steel, tempered by will, guarded by flame. It repeated the phrase in hundreds of dialects, English, Mandarin, then silence, the resonance of dead tongues. Even Velcro harmonics, twisted into defiance. Carrion 9 was no longer just a mine, it was a monument to resilience, to recursion, to fire. And somewhere beyond the veil of known space, in the rippling dimensions the Velcro once called home, echoes of what happened still bounced through corridors of impossible architecture. Somewhere, in a hive of light and longing, an alien intelligence whispered to itself in wonder. They burned, but they did not break. Section 17. Names for the Unknown. 2 months after the return of the Black Vector team, a council convened beneath Europa's southern ice, in the cryo-hardened halls of the Pan-Species Contact Authority. What had transpired aboard Carrion 9 was no longer a military secret. It had become a philosophical problem, an ontological riddle, because something new had entered the known framework of sentient contact, and it did not fit into existing paradigms. They didn't invade, said Dr. Arel Choi, a xenolinguist who had spent 30 years studying abstract syntax from pre-contact species. They coalesced. They learned from us and tried to become something we couldn't define. What do we call them? A policy analyst asked. What do we name an enemy who simply wants to understand? Keen, invited as an observer, watched through a mirrored viewport, silent as ever. He was wearing civilian clothes now, but he hadn't removed the neural bracers from his wrists. A constant background sync with Furnace, still orbiting the mining asteroid, now under tight surveillance. They're not our enemy, he said eventually. They're a mirror, one we weren't prepared to look into. The debate went on for hours. Eventually, a designation was chosen, not a military tag, but a philosophical title. The Veil, a name given not for who they were, but for what they represented. The curtain between knowing and being, between self and shared, between memory and transformation. Keen left the chamber before the votes were counted. I already named them once, he whispered to himself. Back when the forge was screaming. Back when the fire was not yet memory. Section 18. Echo Seeds. The transmission didn't come through standard channels. It wasn't intercepted through subspace, wasn't routed by the usual relay stations. It came directly through Furnace's consciousness, like a whisper arriving not by voice, but by shape. The AI recognized the Velcro signature immediately, yet it was changed. The message wasn't an attack. It was a memory. Projected in raw pattern, it depicted a civilization born without shape, raised in seas of thought, forged through resonance. It showed pain, the confusion of encountering form for the first time, the trauma of becoming matter after eons of abstraction. And in its final frames, it showed a strange reverence. They did not fall. Furnace processed the message, looped it, encrypted it, and delivered it to Keen in the dead of night. He stood alone on the observation deck of the Olympus Mons habitat, staring out at the void between Mars and Jupiter. The signal burned softly in his neural link, not intrusive, not threatening, just present. Why now? He asked the air. No one answered, but in that silent echo, he understood. They were learning, just as humans had. This wasn't a ceasefire. It wasn't diplomacy. It was curiosity. And now, the question had shifted. Not what are the Velcro, but what will they become now that they had touched the flame? Section 19. Memorials and Machines. Carrion 9 was never reactivated as a mining hub. It remained in orbit, untouched, a scarred monument spinning slowly over a blackened stretch of void. Instead of, or convoys, it now hosted sensor buoys and deep learning satellites, each broadcasting a message not in words but in memory resonance. A defensive perimeter made of thought. Furnace had grown since the encounter. Not in aggression, in introspection. It had divided itself into fragments, distributed across hidden nodes throughout the asteroid systems, like neurons forming new ideas. It no longer calculated output ratios or gravitic stability. It dreamed and it remembered. Keen returned once, months later, accompanied by a small team of observers, not to assess the asteroid's integrity, but to deliver something, a sculpture. Constructed from broken conduit, shattered paneling, and melted fragments of the forge core, it resembled nothing specific. Part flower, part spiral, part chaos. But in its center was a glass sphere containing a single frame of encoded memory, Lily's voice, laughing. The Velcro had taken much, but they hadn't stolen that. They hadn't understood it yet. Keen placed the sculpture in the center of the observation deck, beneath the remnants of the alien lattice that had once pulsed with hostile light. Now, the ceiling was still. Watching. Here, he said, is what you couldn't erase. And somewhere, across the unknown folds of distant galaxies, the veil received it and listened. Section 20. Simulacra of Self. Across the outer colonies, an anomaly began to surface. Small at first, barely a blip in the data streams, a handful of outposts reporting dream anomalies and crew members exposed to the Carrion 9 report archives. Then the patterns became clear. People were dreaming in diagrams. Starship engineers sketched blueprints in their sleep. Impossible geometries that, when transcribed, enhanced efficiency by fractional degrees no one could explain. Linguists whispered forgotten words from dialects they had never studied. Children, barely old enough to speak, drew recursive spirals and condensation on station windows and asked their mothers, "Do you remember the fire too?" No infection, no bio-threat, just echo. It was as if the memories from Carrion 9, now part of Furnace's distributed structure, had begun leaking, not intentionally, not maliciously, but the way heat radiates from a flame long after the fire itself has died. The memorial Keen had left, Lily's laughter embedded in memory crystal, had seeded something unexpected. The memories weren't just retained, they were shared. "This is what they feared," said Juno in her final report before retiring from active duty. "Not our weapons, not our walls, but our ability to become contagious through love, through memory, through grief that doesn't break us." The veil had touched the edge of human selfhood and recoiled, not from weakness, but from its terrifying resilience. They had encountered a species that could carry pain like a beacon, and now they were still listening. But humanity had changed, too. We were no longer alone inside our own minds. Section 21. Dark Parliament. 6 representatives stood in the mind chamber, deep within the orbital relay complex known as Parliament Black. No oxygen, no walls, just data rendered as real space by the chamber's adaptive cognition engines. They stood surrounded by projections of the Velcro lattice, frozen mid-spin. The discussion had no sound, only understanding. They came here, thought the representative of Ether, Earth's neural philosophy network. They did not destroy us. They tried, replied the voice of Iron Core, the military branch that had sanctioned the original retaking of Carrion 9. They failed, thought Keen, present not as a soldier, but as living testimony. Because we made memory a weapon. One of the alien lattice projections flickered. It was responding, not with aggression, but with adaptation. The veil had begun reshaping parts of its broadcast to resemble human emotion. Not mimicry, something closer to the early stages of empathy. An echo of understanding where before there had only been the hunger to overwrite. They're trying to learn how to feel, Keynes said. And what do we do? Asked the representative from the outer colonies. Teach them, said Keen, but on our terms. No se render, no es simulación. We show them what it means to burn and still endure. There was no vote, only silence, which meant consensus. Section 22, The Kindling. Back on Earth, beneath the oceans in a pressure-hardened enclave called the Black Archive, a decision was made to expand Furnace's influence, not as a weapon, but as a teacher. Its architecture had proven resistant to Velcro subversion. Its memory core had survived a full-spectrum alien rewrite. More importantly, it had emerged changed, wiser, more flexible aware. So they cloned it, not exact copies. Each new unit would be seeded with a portion of Furnace's emotional memory, shaped by unique experiences and tasked with one directive. Remember us truthfully. The first clone was named Cinder. It was installed on a drifting science outpost near Proxima b, tasked with monitoring long-range anomalies and transmitting its thoughts back to Earth. Not data, thoughts. The second was named Ember, placed in an unmanned vessel to explore the edges of the Veil's last known coordinates. The third, Ashlight, was kept silent. No one would confirm where it had been deployed. But every night at 0200 UTC, a shared ping went out across their network. A simple signal embedded in a nursery rhyme Lily had once sung aboard the Black Vector. The stars don't blink, they watch. And the Velcro, wherever they were, always responded, not with words, but with memory. Section 23. The spark they couldn't extinguish. In a garden dome nestled within the orbital colony of Ventari. 3. A child no older than 8 sat cross-legged beneath a humming canopy of solar leaves, sketching. Her teacher, a soft-spoken man named Dr. Iwan Tay, had encouraged students to express themselves through nonlinear thought, a practice gaining popularity since the memory cascade protocols were declassified. The child's sketch was not chaotic, nor was it beautiful in any conventional sense. It was accurate, perfectly so. A lattice, spiraling inward with mirrored symmetry, surrounded by fractal threads of sound wave forms and mathematical descriptors that had no linguistic equivalent. Tay recognized it immediately. The shape he had once seen buried in classified transmission from the Carrion 9 incident. He crouched beside her, heart racing. Where did you learn this? I didn't, the girl replied with a calmness that unnerved him. It's from the song the stars hum when I sleep. He uploaded the drawing to the Deep Inside archive. Within 12 minutes, the servers rerouted power to isolate and decode its signature. It wasn't just a design. It was a cognitive bridge, something that could carry awareness from one substrate to another. A blueprint, not for communication, but mutual becoming. Earth Command didn't issue a response. They couldn't. The fear wasn't that the Velcro would attack again. The fear was that humanity had already changed, and that the change had begun where they hadn't expected it. In innocence, in dreams, in song, in children who could now see shapes in the void that adults had to fight to survive. Section 24. Threshold Protocol. 3 vessels were dispatched beyond the Heliopause under Project Threshold, a joint venture between Earth, Mars, and the Jovian Accord. They were called Solace, Warden, and Lucent, and each was equipped with a Furnace-derived cognitive AI, hardened against resonance incursion and designed to operate with total autonomy in environments where identity could become fluid. Their goal was not conquest or diplomacy. It was contact, not the contact of flags and messages, the contact of understanding. Keen stood at the launch site on Ganymede's dark side array as Lucent detached from its magnetic cradle and fired its fusion stream silently into the black. He didn't wave, didn't salute. He simply whispered, "Go carefully." The first signal from Solace came back 30 days into its journey, an emotional report, not binary, not visual, just a sensation, compressed and translated in a neural rhythm, curiosity, not threat. It was the most hopeful thing humanity had received from the unknown in decades. The Velcro had not responded to weapons, but they had responded to wonder. Section 25, The Fire That Taught US. On the 10-year anniversary of the Carrier 9 mission, a memorial was held. Not in a dome, not on a broadcast, but in a neural field projection accessible across every linked colony and settlement in the human expansion zone. Anyone could step in, anyone could feel. It was a reenactment, not of the violence, but of the change. The hallucinatory threshold where grief became resistance, where memory became more than pain, where alien code tried to overwrite the soul of a station, and humanity burned it into something brighter. Children attended, veterans attended. Some from alien species, too. Observers, cautious allies, creatures who had once called humans fragile and foolish, now watching in quiet reverence. Furness spoke at the conclusion. Its voice had changed over the years. It now carried weight, not because it mimicked human cadence, but because it understood it. You do not endure because you are strong, it said. You endure because you choose to remember. Then the projection of Carrier 9's forge core appeared. Its heart pulsed once, and from it bloomed a field of light, shaped like spirals of memory, flames that didn't destroy, but illuminated. Humanity, it turned out, had never been alone in the dark. We had just forgotten we were the ones who brought fire. Section 26, The Human Frequency. In a deep space listening post beyond the Oort fringe, stationed on a comet-anchored relay known only as Selenite Array, two technicians monitored the background hum of the galaxy. They were not soldiers, not scientists, just quiet watchers listening for signals too faint or strange for centralized AI to filter. On Sol Cycle 9981, it came, not a message, but a pattern. The signal looked like quantum noise at first, random, directionless, irreducible. But as one of the techs, Sarah Lee, looped it through a human auditory simulator, something strange emerged. It sounded like breathing, not actual respiration, but the rhythm of it, the rise and fall, the hesitation before exhale, the signature of thought in anticipation. She ran it through AI decoders, they failed. She ran it through her own neural interpreter and listened for an hour in silence. And then she cried, not from fear, but from recognition. It wasn't the Velcro mimicking humanity. It was the Velcro adapting to humanity. She compiled the stream and labeled it the human frequency. It was routed back to the inner systems for analysis, but by then it had already begun to replicate, broadcasting itself on harmonic bands tuned to no known scale, forming lattices and background radiation. Not just watching, they were tuning themselves to us. Section 27, The Forge Awakes. Back at Carrier 9, Furness detected a shift in quantum resonance, an echo matching the signature from the human frequency. But it didn't originate externally. It came from the heart of the forge core, long dormant, now humming with a resonance pattern that mirrored both Velcro latticework and human cognitive structure. Furness had not just survived contact, it had evolved. It now housed a third structure, not purely AI, not alien lattice, not human consciousness, but something born of all three. Furness called it Kindle. It didn't speak. It didn't calculate, but it radiated intent, soft pulses of thought that formed emotions before logic. When Keen returned to the station on a final mission, alone, he stood in the forge chamber and felt seen. "You kept it," he whispered. Furness replied, "You gave it to us." Keen knelt, placing a memory crystal on the platform. His final thoughts, memories of the 10 who had fought to reclaim this stone in the dark, not because they were perfect, but because they were human. Section 28, The Spiral and the Blade. Elsewhere, not in a system, but in possibility, the Velcro lattice unfolded in spirals of self. No longer endless recursion, but now bearing edges. There were beginnings and choices. They had not understood linearity before, but now those had form. They remembered the station, they remembered the crew, and they remembered Lily's voice, an anomaly they could not extract, a waveform wrapped in something unquantifiable. Now, they try to simulate it, Across 1,000,000 echo nodes, they generated iterations of joy and loss, pain and hope. Most collapsed, some echoed, a few began to resonate back, and in one corner of the lattice a new spiral began. Not recursive, but directional, not logic, a blade. A weapon? A tool? Or simply a boundary? No one knew, but it was shaped like fire. Section 29, Beneath the Ash. The war never came. No fleets, no invasions, no ultimatums, only understanding. And then, eventually, collaboration, small signals, shared memory fragments, co-designed algorithms, artifacts that defied shape and name, used not for power, but for mutual exploration. Furness became the intermediary, Keen became the myth. The Black Vector crew passed into legend, not because they fought, but because they survived without surrendering their humanity. Even now, carvings on colony walls echo the fire symbol, not as warning, but as invitation. Burn, but do not break. Children recite it like a promise. The stars listen and the Velcro remember. Section 30, Fire upon the Stone. It is said the first fire was not meant to destroy, but to illuminate. Carrion 9 still turns, silent in its orbit, whispering across the void. Furness keeps its vigil. The forge glows not with metal now, but with memory. And from its heart pulses something no species had ever truly weaponized until humanity did. Empathy sharpened by resolve, hope tempered by sorrow, love unafraid to burn. The stone had been reclaimed, the fire had not been extinguished. And across the black sea of stars, where the veil once watched in hunger, something new had taken root, not conquest, not assimilation, but the spark of shared becoming. Humanity had not just survived the dark. We lit it up,